Hello, species value nature system. My name is Anthony Wall. You can call me Romulus. Please don't miss the shadow boxing videos. I have to get my professional boxing license. I had many fights through USA Boxing. And then the World Trade Center attack happened. And leading up to it and in it and since, countries A through Z have been grouped in ways they are directed to hide. Simultaneously, those are directions to defend and to self-value a quality of fact-treating nature. That is three ways: criminally foreign influenced / hyper-criminally foreign influenced, and pretending other, and or that body is sensed, even if that body is a majority of people, even if it is everybody, as we are on paper. Because as we are on paper, since before modern religious messengers per science, we have been systems forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to defend ourselves and uses of our names and other people's names and things, the names of things, as systems tactical ulterior from the one that is hyper simultaneous, the only one. So we need, science also shows us this too. The needs to discern this as a distinct identity of hyper simultaneous. And while we are simultaneously not supposed to agree about the name, if and where we're not supposed to agree if we need the name or not, but to have the nature of the debate to get through where there are and how there are, not just foreign names involved with the sense and sensibilities. For example, use Jane Austen's phrase. I did not have the privilege to read the book yet. But slavery was entrenched. Torture and extortion of our founders as well, sickly distinctly. And there was a function right through our schools still, the lead up to what really led up to the Constitutional Convention and what really led up to the Declaration of Independence. They have that measured and maintained left out. So people will use their knowledge of good and evil as the names of the sciences, right where they didn't fathom everything they want and need to counter. For example, where and how everyone knows that there has been criminally foreign influence. Other than nature, what it communicates with black and white, black pupils. We all have black pupils, whites of eyes. And this is left out with how the breaching method had been before America's founders were born. Slavery had been entrenched north and south. Our founders left them, the North and South, to fight about slavery against everyone, sickly distinctly and sickly non-distinctly, because that's what it's about, teaching about the breaching method that was entrenched. The breaching method no one could fathom countering. That our founders behind James Madison came up with a plan that would make someday the potential of countering it possible. And this is the same type of plan, that Vladimir Putin was telling Tucker Carlson about in a video I did a video of. But he was cut off by Tucker Carlson, their proofs, even if it wasn't. In other words, it's because these sciences have been abridged. Specifically to keep the quality aspects and the nature of debate measured and maintained, criminally foreign influenced, tactically delusions raw, / crack, tactically delusions raw, relative to these principles. Proper, which is relative to how they have hyper simultaneous conjunction. There is a means to make hyper-positives out of negatives. All we have known since ancient times, all anybody has heard, self-value, even when countering, because they're blaming on other things, others or selves, exactly how the breaching method wanted and needs. Because we are individuals, we are grouped difference slash s, and that singular difference is the identity of the hyper simultaneous, which is demonstrably hyperrelativity. It is a distinct identity of volume, as a distinct identity of hyper invisible but still discernible. That is also hyperconjunctive to all parts of English grammar, for example, and of other grammars, of all things, even things made up, individually grouped and together the same way. Same reason why and how it shows us that its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that are equally increasing as any real subject. Like, for example, where and how the other species bodies too. And they are individuals, grouped difference slash S, and species body slash S. In other words, there is one identity, its identity of relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that. That is everything and everybody, while it is not. Just like the tip of your finger, the tip of your fingernail is your identity, is your complete identity, but while it is not. This breaching method assigns uses of questions to measure and maintain communications by the people making it as confessions regarding their roles, with uses of collusion slash S with this breaching method at each age of factory nature. And then increasingly chasing positive and being positive and negative. Tactical ulterior from how this breaching method. And tactical ulterior from how nature has 5 distinct identity of positive, as itself as time was before the smallest finite detail now, like America's republic or of other countries' republics. A through Z, we are in a semi-ancient trap referred to as ancient times. And agreements regarding how to tell history and counters to that and exceptions have remained collusion slash S. Self-value for where and how all it is used remotely. See, suits and ties, counters and exceptions. Left out, for example, how in America and in Russia, before America's founders were even born, the suburbs were designed for torture and extortion, with slavery entrenched north and south, and tactical delusions, tactically replaced educations and identity slash identities of value progression. All tactical ulterior from how nature is. The hyper value progression slash S. And we could be in stay systems tactical ulterior from its own. But it will only force belief of ideas, being where and how Earth and our special difference hyper additionally from and as it and it from and as us is per where and how it is hyper additionally. Its identity of volume as the extent we can discern. Its identity relationship to itself and the only increasing value of that. It's all the parts of speech, all the parts of grammar, all the parts of English, down to the little words, the little letters. They were revealed to teach about and for the discernment of the difference between the invisible slash hyper invisible, but still discernible. It is the verb and the subject, therefore, are invisible but still discernible. Why and how? We need more than one name for a verb. We need to call it a predicate. We also need to call it participle natures, either a past participle or present participle. I'm referring to it as a participle nature because it's how the identity works, per how nature shows us to read the rules of the parts of speech, of the identity the sciences share. Boxing, martial arts, and wrestling. They're about fighting, but they're about fighting by the rules. But the rules have remained abridged since semi-ancient times. It's just that referred to as ancient times. Because more and more you have to see why you have replaced what James Madison's plan was about and the founders behind him, and the relativity of understanding that and how and why George Washington then agreed to help that plan. And we were supposed to be honest about the extortion of George Washington. But we have not had that. Instead, too, we have people that the difference of if they like each other or not, who goes to the same town. They're just putting fake things, fake conversations. They're changing what's actually recorded. There are people. There's a Chet Casper and a Mike Daly years ago, who pretended like verbally like there were verbal words with me. I don't know. We didn't have any communications there. That it was next to the state capitol. It has something to do. People at Hartford Hospital and involved with my neighbors brought up the name Casper involved with them. As one of the people involved further with the principal child offender, and there are medical offenders, foreign and domestic involved. Timed uses of corners of streets, even they don't realize. A Rick Ciampaglione called me to his house. Then he asked me if I wanted to buy for $20 a fishing tackle box. Has something to do with his rules of wire crime acts and methods, with a Ray Colo and with a Tim O'Brien. And then they were trying to make a fake exception of me knowing them, because they have been putting predicate acts with facts with people at each of the campuses I went to, even before I went to the campuses with them. In other words. So, and these are people involved with judges and prosecutors, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, military police, foreign and domestic, putting fake things, fake motivations for it too, even when they're real ones, because they put this does this vertically and horizontally, keeps their uses of, in other words, their boyfriends, girlfriends for federal evidence, crime methods, collusions, cover-ups. Good people, how they stay evil relative to this. How they could get away with debating. In other words, not legal debate, not sane debate, with exceptions. Got away with pretending they couldn't discern where and how the cities, the suburbs, let alone the cities, sickly distinctly too, to measure functionally how sickly non-distinctly they were designed for torture, extortion, and slavery. That slavery science and method /S that was entrenched north and south, even with the end of the Civil War. These sides were forced to fight. Judge Napolitano, I put a link to one of his videos. And I don't know which video it was in, he said somewhere that the South had never officially surrendered. Now, so in other words, when people debate, the education's something they're defending, as if it has books that are discernibly, vetted, checked to make sure they're accurate. But in other words, in our faces, this is not. Because of the collusion /S with natures of industry, including it's concentrated with psychiatry. And this is their roles of people making theories regarding crime, who are still rules of predicate acts with facts methods. I'm not a lawyer. Nature itself can show us, not just boxing, martial arts, and wrestling, share an identity grouped. This is that because of its ideas, the identity the sciences share, where and how they appear not to share an identity is where it goes with where and how we are being demonstrated to increasingly simultaneously our ways. How more and more hyper-additional nature is being made relative to the identity of hyper-relativity, its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that only increasing. And with and as relativity to Earth's a special difference, to all a special difference. But see, now we have appreciated a special difference through and as systems tactical terror from its own. So it forces least of high deeds. Earth's a special difference through humanity from here. Worse than not superior to the other animals and creatures. You must be led by the hyper-invisible but still discernible. The right to remain innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. So they're making things up and have made them up. And then rather than fix those things real quick or gradually, in other words, they have rules with torture methods, predicate acts with facts methods, with families and positions of all natures of sciences, including on off the state corrections offices, on the state judicial branch offices, used remotely 3 ways: criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence. Now, to discern this, we have to begin with the original discernment of it, where and how our founders in that plan was to counter extort at 13 locations within more than 13 colonies, which I learned in notes at Central Connecticut State University. And then, but if I learned the thing about James Madison in the book, that book was stolen from me. So we have FBI director, former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, has roles of people on and off Central Connecticut State University, intercities, on off campuses, election spots, Wethersfield town offices, involved with people on off the state, on off New Britain Superior Court, and Hartford courts, and their rules on off Central Connecticut State University, and other courts, a whole bunch of probate, at least 3 probate court judges, and their family members involved with the same house/S with wire crimes of the Wethersfield police. And it's all, in other words, these are a whole bunch of people that work with Hartford hospitals, Institute of Living, and the emergency room with the psychiatry side of it. Their families have been, and themselves, they've been attaching people to fake transcripts. And they've been as roles with the names who've been stacking predicate acts with facts into databases and roles. Further, with a principal child abuser that I caught them using for worse originally and still. And they hid what was confessed to me that brought it up by the others involved. And because there were rules with intelligence, a whole bunch of different countries. Whole bunch of people tied to a former Mayor Gold and a Debbie Gold who went out of their way to pretend to know me. And with the exceptions that I'm involved with behavior racketeering, worse than war crimes, which in ways forgiveness is designed for. Because it was relative to how they're hiding the lie progressions, people from off campuses of all ages and ages. And of all locations/S first. This breaching method fit all needing to hide lie progressions. relative to those roles: forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded. And see, everyone increasingly has their motivation up front with it, and why, in other words, why they blame on other things, others themselves. Things that we're supposed to blame on the predicate acts for facts method. It's not supposed to be able to get away with denying that, assigning black and white to mean other than I mean. And while it's relative to all these other subject treatments that are inseparable. So we have subject treatments roles that are measured and maintained. Then as styles, you need to pretend not to realize by being styles forced by nature. And this breaching method shows everyone how to do that. Some people aren't following their predicate acts for facts rules sustained as collusion /S on off all natures of crime scenes. And with, so effective uses of killers, effective uses of the World Trade Center attack. We don't want torture. So we have faith in people. We know we have faith in people, so that's why I blame this name. That we're not, and they keep switching the names, then we never get to the factual nature quality. Capable of overcoming the threats that lead to wars and their roles with screening the hyper-revolution against every modern country. That is negative one. But in other words, and it keeps everyone blaming everything other things other than themselves. What it cost historically, which is still being demonstrated by nature, in other words, and tied to all these subjects, tied to all these sciences' names. One way alone, it only feels like games. Evolution's fruits and gifts means out of nowhere. This pantheism dominated properly. See, modern countries like Russia and America, the suburbs were designed tactically to nature to be a landscape theater, not realizing, causing negative value nature, while the negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures are being caused. Pollution, this is why the rivers and all that. Everyone's blaming other, even when they're blaming the correct things, everyone miss how they're blaming. They're leaving out the breaching method. Forgiveness is for even when we're blaming the right things correctly, not to leave out the hypercriminal foreign influences that also effectively assign that as one of the things to keep people self-valued roles and believing, in other words, blaming other things other than themselves. Where, in other words, this led up to World War I and World War II. The breaching method was still entrenched. There are means to discern the breaching method still entrenched by asking people what Jim Crow laws were about. Now, would they think about what people that don't know, if they think they understand it properly? Because one thing Jim Crow laws are about, just like the witch trials, that they're about that breaching method that was to measure and maintain through databases relativity /relativities to all people, where our identity is an identity of value /value progression that is simultaneously greater than and more finite than ourselves, while not. And so we could discern its trinity, which the discernment of comes through appreciation of the extent we can discern of it with each subject. That which is actually true always, not denying the slightest detail. Even if any part, whatever part or a whole thing, what it was about, or what if they had to make it up for some good reasons, our founders, which trials were about. One of the things we know it was about is what was going on, North and South, sickly distinctly, but also sickly non-distinctly. Before America's founders were born, slavery was entrenched. People were stuffed into these homes too, that are suburban design that were less than they wanted. In other words, they were sickly, distinctly enslaved. Now, if they would speak about that, they would be sensed through all the identities of roles with it and crazy threats on them if they weren't poised, pretending to be natures of integrity, pretending to be capable of speaking for the identity of order, which is 5 distinct identities of order. As the sequence true before the order of the finite, as the order of the finite, as the order that is active, grouped, as the order that is progressive. It shows us the value of seasons to come, for example, before they are here. And it shows us that portion of time we don't know about, but we could learn more about that portion of itself by appreciating it that way and relative to other parts of time. Other parts are positive. Those 5 parts / might, because there are 1/3/5 ways grouped where it's solid, only increasing identity of volume. To the extent we can discern, it comes with 2 other identities of volume, sound as value as nature / nature as value. And conversely, nature as this is true simultaneously. Nature as value / value as nature. Per how we can discern this. But we have to be able to appreciate where too, not just boxing, martial arts, and wrestling share an identity. Again, they are about fighting, but by the rules. But the rules have been abridged since semi-ancient times to keep us from discerning how properly to speak for and to discern and appreciate and value positive or negative, or debate, or the value of sides in cases, of the lawyers, logic, and opinions, or the court's judges. See, they have been leaving out as the breaching method when the new act, countries A through Z, locations, areas, states. They've been leaving out and making up fake exceptions. And as exception nature, self-value, as criminal insidiousness nature / hypercriminal insidiousness nature. For example, whereas it's discernible, where you don't take serious, when people like me or anyone who would say, we have black people's rights of eyes, a breaching method assigned both colors and the difference to be roles, keeping the difference racketeering, worse than war crimes, for example, so to speak. Blame the other things, others ourselves. Keeping the predicate acts with facts, method /s, the real worst causes and uses of it. Blame the other things, others ourselves. This breaching method shows people. It makes the problem with the borders. It understood problems like that would be. Even India, China. Pretty sure I heard China has problems with borders too. Russia has problems with borders. They could traverse the earth, but we still have suburbs that before cars, the people wanted to be free from. Suburbs. The cities were only allowed to unfold that way. So the suburbs and the cities too at the same time now need food and resources from other locations while drinking water out of plastic bottles. See, the lead in the pipes should be better than free. See, we were doing everything through value nature systems still involved with the whip and torture method. Again, too, sickly distinctly against everyone, but against everyone, sickly non-distinctly too, which is simultaneously comes with hyper-simultaneous revelation. This is how the mind works. Harvard Hospital has a whole bunch of people tied to the names, like a Leahy family, who is involved with this Rick Ciampaglione, with the names Cololo and O'Brien, with wire crimes when I was a kid that are relative to the police forging and switching names now, and their roles with various natures of judges. And they're lying about how and why I use their name. They brought it up in the newspaper when they were forcing a principal child abuser. With worse, I caught first in that. And untimely death rolls, one at the campus of Trinity College, and rolls with that too, with the house where one was years ago when it was confessed to me, made confessions about that with the people involved with that. Even if any of this was made up, there were simultaneously murders intercities, and the same names rolls with that. They have something to do with their roles with the sides of Trinity College and CCSU, with people who've been stacking falsified police reports since they were kids. Rules even in criminal, reportedly in even civil cases, and recorded in civil cases too. All sides in criminal and civil cases in the intelligence community and the three branches, and the difference of that used consciously in the news at the same time. It is recorded how good people stay evil. Everyone's a coward too. Like, in other words, I don't know. I'm pretty sure I heard on the television, MSNBC, Fox News, or CNN, somewhere that President Trump had said, because they're trying to figure out. See, when people make statements, you guys change with the studies to pretend you're trying to be honestly deciding if they're telling the truth or not. In other words, I was attached to fake conversations with WFSB, fake conversations with other people too, and about the World Trade Center, as there rules with a whole bunch of ways with names with the World Trade Center in New York City. They have rules with the Intercities, Connecticut, and with the names that, then the world, think about that name, World Trade. And think about that name, Coalition. So you have locations, areas, and states at A through Z, countries A through Z, that will only allow entertained. What had been entertained, you can't entertain that and be capable to answer any of the questions, let alone formulate a solution that won't be used by the breaching method. There's a difference between making criminal insidiousness natures of positive out of negative, exactly the way the breaching method wanted and needs. Like, for example, black and white with syntax, convictions by that. Nature debate, what people call theory. On a mass scale, take it to the courts. That's what people are doing, even online and with the networks. In other words, but they're pretending they don't realize that they have roles already with their sources into branch, planting evidences. This breaching method used that remotely. They can't defend their nature debate regarding what happened with the Capitol attack. Was it January 6th? In other words, with the riot. In other words, the groupthink. They can't defend all sides in the counters to it, can't defend that. And afford counter how discernibly criminal foreign influences / hypercriminally foreign influences are involved. How and why they're communicating other than James Madison and our founders behind him. And then and George Washington too. How they're communicating other than he has to have communicated for himself. We're supposed to first begin by being honest about the extortion of George Washington. To do that, we're supposed to be informed and understanding clear the torture, extortion, and fact tribunation slavery of James Madison. How everyone had to hide who they actually were. How everyone had to entertain things left entrenched, readings of laws that were terrorism, worse than war crimes. And this breaching method showed them they have to counter nature's demonstrations of that with negative value nature progressions, acts, natures. Acts like predicate acts, natures like criminal and seditious natures, wrongdoers. See, the lawyers The judges, they came through campuses, certain type of victim slash hyper victim. This breaching method knew that all identities of jobs, they would have the imposition of having had and having still entertained systems tactical ulterior than the laws per nature, for correlation proper. In other words, black pupils. There's a famous sentence in American history: don't shoot until you see the whites of eyes. You guys need to understand how the breaching method was still entrenched, how they had to force, trick, hurt, and persuade England to fight with us. Because the breaching method had possession and has possession of England's name and identity of value / value progression. Because use of names A through Z, by names A through Z, is maintained effectively. In other words, we can go like that and make bottoms claimed and give security for markets, wealth and things like that. And people without it, because the wealth, all natures of industry, they had collusions with the branches that have state collusion, blaming out other things, others themselves. All nature's demonstrations, for example, about all kinds of negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, caused just by having taught wrong about how and not taught at all, and replaced what is actual about why and how the breaching method signed black and white to mean other. And then America's founders were born. And the breaching method laws were were set up to already entrenched to sense anyone way far short of that. Anyone, even a majority of people, with database relativity since before computers, as an identity of value / value progression. Again, as a system / as tactical ulterior from the hypernative system / as tactical ulterior from how it uses plurality and our own differences. It is why we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time. It's not just because we have black, white, and other sign. There are exceptions. Some people have black pupils, white eyes, and the same color eyes, with the exceptions, with the halo of the eye. And nature is showing us you can make positives out of negatives, except how you could also make criminal insidiousness natures a positive out of negative. So when people are speaking for diplomacy, for example, or trade, they have been only known to be, it's in other words, they've already entertained where you can't entertain. Pretended to be capable of speaking for integrity. You have to understand those basic, pre-grammar school understanding of this. We need everyone to understand how a breaching method was entrenched. And how do you discern that? You discern that's what was recorded against Native Americans, who are a portion of our founders. But they were still fighting with each other. Just like Americans, all of a sudden they're Americans. They're still fighting with each other. There's still slavery entrenched north and south. That means there's all kinds of crazy things, all kinds of predicate acts with facts, natures, needs, styles of syntax, incapable of defending that and of the word and of speaking for the Constitution of unabridged. let alone being it and speaking it simultaneously. That would be sensed right through our own, even if it was a majority of people, even if it was everyone, even if it was all the countries together, even the most powerful groupings. This preaching method knew they would speak for humanity as these systems totalitarian. This preaching method knew that people would hunger. How many? How many? That's one of the things they don't know how to speak about because they're pretending it's been natural. Why and how the people of America and Russia, China, we have to hunger now and rely on foods coming from other stuff, locations, water and bottles, etc. Because suits and ties, counters and exceptions have the fundamentals, the principles of reason replaced and changed as collusion slash S. Worse than crime, the one with the worst natures of crimes, roles to sustain. And that's the only people are going to be speaking about crimes with some sciences, sometimes some sciences, and then we have science experts on war. So we're on the edge of war. Is always. For example, because they left out revolution's course. They left out which surges through all things and even force. Well, not. Vaccines, wow, cool. It's just for warmth. For what? Hyper-simultaneous. In other words, heaven and hell is more probable, demonstrably, with scientific values. In Allah's name, the scientific values, where and how there was an ancient method by this. In other words, slash S. In other words, they were preaching unabridged how and why the science is sharing identity the way they do. Even, for example, its identity will only stay positive unto itself. So even if it forced people to roles where no one wanted, and then it made exceptions, and then now people want, with slavery. In other words, it made slaves do things they didn't want to do, but they would say and want to do it because the result would be worse. And those slaves were also our founders. So remember, that's part of which trials are about. You have to understand these 5 identities of power, might, also 3 ways grouped. In other words, and the 5 ways comes with showing us too how functionally is how there are distinct parts of itself wherein it is discernibly hyper invisible but still discernible. For example, the present participle and the past participle are 2 invisible but still discernible parts of time. But it comes also with a third it's third invisible but still discernible. But the way it's invisible but still discernible, for example, begin to discern it's why and how there were only 2 parts. There's a past and the present, and they're not speaking about the active. And so, in other words, but just agreeing that we had a shared enemy that came from before modern religious messengers, we don't have to agree about them. That forced trick to hurt and persuaded and employed our hunger, our thirst at A through Z, at locations, areas, and states. Because we have to address it, because this is where they are victims / hyper victims, and forcing leaders to entertain that. Even when sometimes too, then you have leaders forcing you not to because you're leaving it out. The difference. So those positions are now through as a system /S, tactile the natures, no matter what someone's intentions are, no matter how, in other words, brilliant someone could be. You're not doing it through its system. In other words, regarding the all this is employed. When they speak and they give examples about how there are these kinds of weapons and that, like that, in other words, we have experts who know about things because you have to follow a certain track or you're never going to be that type of expert. Before you, that whole track demonstrates how it's criminally foreign influence of every science. The boxing gyms are used where and how, in other words, we have to use to discern the hyper visible, but still, we could use where the courts, the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and all the culturals A through Z, tactical terrier from how nature system, because of the breaching method. But to discern that, we have to list how they are guilty. This is one of the ways we could do this. But in other words, anyone who wants to deny that this was about and is about predicate acts with facts, having the nature regarding the nature of the significance of the hyper-evidential, for how we have black people's whites of eyes, same colorized and different colorized at the same time. How exceptions and exception nature are involved, not just with the fact that we could have, in other words, nature itself is showing us that criminal insidiousness has relativity to a special difference that needs to be spoken for. But the names of the experts of sciences A through Z are a certain type of victim /hyper victim. They're already repeated other people's reporting what they heard as collusion /S. And they also had their words changed, faked, even just faked. This breaching method knew that they would how it could measure and maintain locations, areas, and states criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions wrought, with instances, responses, non-responses, formal, and then show them that they need to hide that down the road. They even have they have the torture method /S before the World Trade Center attack, and they had forced Saudis to rolls, and those Saudis forced us to rolls with the coalition itself forced the rolls because you guys leave people speaking about things like democracy, like voting, but you jump into people's conversations and you prevent them short words and your self-valuing roles with the fake transcripts and databases, including on and off campuses filmed 24/7, which brings up the relativity of how a whole bunch of different countries punish each other for such things, fake audio and video, and uses of it time. It's supposed to be, in other words, where our bodies are forced to be grouped, connected as a species body, and not, as a species body grouped and as groupings and individuals. See, again, this is not just tactical terrier from nature's way method, but per use /S of that by a singular breaching method, human factor, human nature breaching method. So also hyper-evidential is that and how there are so many proofs, conclusive, demonstrably, everyone's hunger and thirst, and needs to, and leaders need to feed all these locations, areas, and states with stuff, from other locations. There are proofs that the breaching method tactically denatured. They took all the citrus and things like that, but not just to make people in their systems. And Native Americans. That's why we haven't appreciated Native Americans' rights and chief, the difference between chief and president properly yet. In other words, 3 ways. Because you have to understand that breaching method was entrenched before our founders were born. It was the one most having made the Native Americans, who were different Native Americans, but they were shown distinctly, sickly distinctly, but also sickly non-distinctly, that they had to counter and figure out what to do about. Everyone names all these names A through Z and rolls with differences. Tactical terror from how nature uses difference. Nature that is hyper-native pure. Nature is showing us this. The only increasing value of Native American difference. It's not just their physical voice, though. So the physical voice could defend the Constitution on a bridge. In other words, in other words, as we know, in other words, but they're forcing quality fact human nature with all sides and all natures of legal cases, as the breaching method knew they would. The problems with the borders, we know it's tied to fentanyl. We know it's tied to people killed. It's a murderous method. We know we have to counter, but the countering bodies are and have state collusion with the torture method, extortion method. Think about that. They have kids in jail for drugs, for marijuana, and adults, and the ones associated with those jails and their doctors, they have rules of all kinds of qualities of marijuana and drugs. With the probation officers and with the judges, their family members, the prosecutors, and they're putting fake things about other people. They're just uses of location /S, the way the breaching method knew they would be at countries A through Z. It's part of the way they get away with it is so many ways they get to duck behind how there are sensitive disabilities. Because we have, Russians and Americans that have shared families here. I believe that he goes to. I believe that one Russian leader has family at Stanford. In other words, the reason we're on the verge of war, again, is because hunger and thirst, and the ground's identity, its identity relationship to itself, and the only increasing value of that. It has been through systems tactical other than that, which is hyper-native, which everything is. In other words, but the nature of the debate regarding all the impositions caused with this also contains demonstrations of other things used, other things others ourselves blamed, right for things our founders told us to blame on the breaching method. They communicated for us to blame on the breaching method. If you examine what was left to decipher, they communicated other than they said, because the breaching method had laws that were the complete possession of the sense and sensibilities of people, not just their syntax. Otherwise, that person will be sensed and hurt, not just the known ways on paper, because there weren't just known ways on paper or not, as he rolls with the use /S of it. And this has to do with the singular use /S of all locations, areas, and states. All locations /S. Every single place the human species volume. Every place the human species body of individual bodies has a body standing. So these big countries rely upon, and we're going to change it for all countries. And those countries we're reliant upon, where the people are fleeing from now. We could do for better than free together. If you guys help these nuclear holding countries so they can, for a temporary time, in other words, we could afford to do things better than free, like make big buildings just for a few families, and then part of it could be for like whatever we have to do. Where there's a problem with this breaching method employed too, homelessness, everything positive and negative, it employed to collusions with itself to keep its identity of relativity, measured, maintained, left out, or that sense, and to our own at A through Z, as roles with relativity to these databases since before computers. Roles and identities of relativity, all locations /S. So we need to defend our names without blaming other things other than ourselves. And we need to be able to call out our country's names, or uses of our country's names rather. And we have to, in other words, because it's uses of Russia's name by Americans and it's uses of Americans' name by Russians. And all these other countries, when they're using each other's names and using our name, again, it's been through a system of tactical terror. It is demonstrably styles and natures of logic that can't defend that and afford discern, which is critical to discern about regarding the significance of the difference between criminal insidiousness, even natures of positive, especially because were criminal insidiousness natures of positive and negative simultaneously to keep obfuscated and worse the breaching method, because every identity of the breaching method was an identity of relativity. It is an identity of relativity, everyone. And every identity of relativity has relativity to positive and negative simultaneously. The same way that value does. All exceptions in exception nature are in demonstration of the same thing, /S. But see, we have not had this appreciated properly because all sides of criminal and civil cases, the lawyers, the interbranch names, the intelligence names, the difference of that, the news people at the same time, names next to them as that. In other words, same ones timed collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones. It is concentrated with foreign and domestic, the medical families with psychiatry, and mass stacking fake things and change things into databases, including at campuses filmed 24/7. Former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, and his lawyer, Robert Chevrolet. And he was warned not to go to that case without a lawyer, by a judge in an NLRB case. But in a 2006 district court case, people next to Fox Connecticut News have roles with all kinds of natures of politicians and police forms and systems roles with the spots next to the news locations, next to public Rocky Hill and Weathersfield public television division locations, involved with Russians. In other words, involved with where and how we could use the hyper-evidential. But this means we have to use names. But see, this is not using names for blame. This is using names for the relativity. They brought this up. They also sequence shifts because increasingly investigators and their campuses and families and where everyone used remotely have to hide lab progression. This is shown to them. So we have, in other words, how they get away with this is also increasingly relative to why and how. In other words, they make fake exceptions to make it pretend that people were friends and things like that. And they want to go back and forth asking questions. Where how is also relative. This breaching method employed the streams of people that go to be before courts each day, whether they go to jail or not. And then they have the people involved with the services, like social workers, doctors, people that work with the courts, where they're not going to go to jail, they're going to do anything. Those places are in collusion too. Again, also simultaneously with through time more and more with overt criminal enterprises, private ones. Timed use is conscious of names next to and at body dumping spots. Murders involved. Same ones involved with the World Trade Center, the spots next to it, including one of the spots next to the World Trade Center in the attack context, the Ninth Circuit Court next to it. Is also used where they have names on all sides in criminal and civil cases, their sources, their family members. And the interbranch that was proven they post-dated from inside the Ninth Circuit Court. Legal papers that had been timely presented to the Ninth Circuit Court. And then the World Trade Center attack caused that chaos. And other things, others themselves were blamed for what really got down. That was defended and is defended, is still self-valued as a means to pretend fake motive, as being used remotely to pretend fake motivations, even with the real ones, regarding their family members' roles with the attack as victims and as themselves, because they were victims, but they lived. See, they're putting people in fake communications with this breaching method. It makes people fight with each other. And these are also fake conversations. And that's, they even go down to that, but putting fake transcripts and natures of communication. They have readings of statutes. They already recorded themselves readings of statutes of precedent, criminally foreign influence / tactically delusions raw. And you can't, there's no prisons to put them in because all the prisons were also too. When it's not them, it's sometimes them, their family members. A whole bunch of people with the names tied to a Subby Bajario is involved with a Judge Smith and other judges involved with medical, sexual, all kinds of identity theft frauds, planting evidences with them and with the news and on next to campuses and further with the people involved with the child offenders, leaders of the kids. Has something to do with the intelligence next to Trinity College and next to Central Connecticut State University, who have roles also with a principal child abuser and then they bring their kids involved. And these are also roles that had timed collusions with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, falsified police reports. And these are with the police families that have been wire crime acts and methods where they use wire crime methods, mail crimes, where they pretended fake conversations, change transcripts with the phones, with emails, and fake motivations for it. That's why they have males and females involved with digital abuses of kids' websites and evidences, and then with the principal child abuser, the same ones, leading up to the World Trade Center attack in that context and since in New York, where there were interstates. These are people involved with Washington, D.C., and New York World Trade Center. Also next to the Central Connecticut, the Connecticut, I don't know if the Connecticut corrections offices. You know how that is on the town line, Wethersfield, Hartford, on off the Connecticut Judicial Branch offices, as the ones involved, in other words, and with the spots next to it, like a Wethersfield Pizza, has a Steven Stock who I had one word of, like a one sentence with him on. I never had a conversation with him other time. He called Wethersfield police. He just hung up on me. I said, is Maria there? He hung up the phone on me. He also pretended passions and emotions at Central Connecticut State University. He was in a class of mine. I never had a word of conversation. It was being bullied all the time, but it was like kind of faked by a Paul Zano and a Ray Colo, who reportedly went to college together in Rhode Island, and they have roles with a John Maiano and with people with the name Luigi and his sisters, also with Central Connecticut State University and my professors, who have roles planting people at campuses, who are a certain type of victim slash hyper victim, repeating fake things, and or roles using truths for lies and to screen them and to communicate confessions as roles preventing mandated law, as collusions also with uses of mandated law readings, as collusions, uses of systems like their systems to report, arrest, put people on to have it, send the officer in to arrest this person. In other words, they have all these systems involved with these are Sandy Hook campuses too. Increasingly, how you doing? I forgot to put in other words. See, this Edwin El Magico says, incoherent rambling, take your medication. People from Mexico and people from America and people from Canada, they have roles with psychiatry databases, with families I caught with the principal child defender and a Brendan Leahy, is a whole bunch of police and kids and adults. I recorded them involved fake conversations with me and with others, with Hartford Hospital. These are doctors that work at Hartford Hospital who have roles with Wethersfield Police and people associated with Whiting Forensics with the name Bob Chase, who also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. He has roles with the Phil Cololo and others I don't know the name of, who are involved with threatening people with drugs and fake uses of drugs, as the police forms that have roles with countering that, as the people they're putting kids, other people's kids, to fake uses of drugs. They're setting up scenarios with their uses of it through time, extending it, and then pretending kids were involved with it that weren't. And they're planting predicate acts with facts roles, hyper-additional from their roles with the planting predicate acts with facts, with black-themed, KKK-themed military, also as a Mark Violet and a Justico Vinskis, as also names involved with the name Cololo. A Joe DeMoro and a Ray Cololo also have roles with doctors, foreign and domestic, involved with medical sexual offenses of kids. And the Joe DeMoro has roles with home break-ins, with the state police, and people involved with the state police interstates. And there's a Ray Reynolds also involved with it. He slept on the floor next to a Ray Reynolds in Vermont. And there was a Mike Roberts and Eric Jensen. And then did this before I ever went to Middlesex Community College. Middlesex Community College has roles with the FBI, state police, and the intelligence community, foreign and domestic military, criminally foreign influence. They plant evidences at locations where used remotely are names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, the lawyers, the news at the same time, the interbranch planting things, and then pretending not to realize years later. And at the time, where and how people could get away with so long, forcing that quality of fact, human nature. Like, in other words, qualities of fact, human nature, criminally foreign influence, that's criminal insidiousness. So the problems with the borders have to do with where the identities of the law have been using their own differences, because this breaching method hurt everyone with changing what color means. Then they're going to go try and speak for it. Okay, well, I'm this color, this is my culture. They're going to leave out the breaching method. they're going to pretend it's debatable. As styles that can't speak for reason and logic, so they bring up drugs and they make it pretend they believe it's about drugs. So these are a whole bunch of judges. They're probate judges. They're involved with nursing homes and with prisons, involved with people with the name Cololo and DeMorrow, who have roles with names next to WFSB and next to WTNH, which is also FBI, and next to the Fox Connecticut News. They have wire crimes of Wethersfield Police, forging and switching names. They also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed their influence to pretend it's personal, to hide the confessions they made regarding the switching names, forging names, and the ones using that as threats. In other words, as worse than chilling, as extortion, worse than extortion. These are also people that work with the campuses, intercity, Rocky Hill campuses, Newington campuses, and Wethersfield campuses have more cover-ups involved. Increasingly, these are people with the Board of Education building and houses next to it, and the DMV and the Department of Motor Vehicles and Department of Transportation people. In other words, insurance companies, all natures of investigations, investigators, and motivations, narratives, and natures, roles. There's a certain type of victim / hyper victim. It's important to fix the fake conversations with me that the news pretended with the interbranch and get them from the names forging and switching. Because you can't just use short words and ask them, and then they'll pretend like they didn't understand. It was there's all these words. So let's look at this word. In other words, they're preventing people short words, getting off the fake conversations with the interbranch. They're also leaking that these are people involved on New Park Avenue in Hartford and spots next to the state capitol who have been planting predicate acts with facts at databases and all along roads and routes. So please get them on paper, one name and sequence, and fix the World Trade Center attack. So this, what they do is they run in. A whole bunch of people ran into Hartford Hospital because I caught them. I didn't even know they were connected with them. I caught them affecting confessions to me intercities with connections between the people even they missed in the same house. So there's people that were from other areas are trying to make it look like I was tied to them and their groups. And they've been putting fake things in databases a long time. They're not legitimately with Army anything. No, whether it was Robert Rodriguez and a Mike Roberts have some shopping center in Rocky Hill and have other shopping centers and people involved with them with foreign and domestic, military, foreign and domestic intelligence, foreign and domestic private, overt criminal enterprises, timed collusions, also with the news at the corners of the streets, planting evidences, identity theft, fraud, slanders, and the interbranch forge and switch names and sequences to prevent writing, criminally foreign influence readings of statutes consciously at locations, planting evidences then for that. All kinds of little magic tricks with thought and reason because of how this breaching method employed uses of their campuses, A through Z. So there's also a Joshua Julian and a Ray Cololo who has roles with medical offenders of kids, sexual and medical and other natures of drugs too, as the ones that are supposed to counter that. There have been roles with the judges and prosecutors with the Hartford Hospital and the spots next to it. These are the Ray Cololo also has roles with a Mayano family and a DeMorrow family and an Iowa family with the campuses at next to Hartford Hospital with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, wire crimes, falsified police reports with police attaching little kids to fake conversations with themselves in databases through time to exploit that. And then as an adult, as their roles, in other words, get them on paper, one name and sequence with the Wethersfield Police and the ones with the confessions has been more and more. In other words, regarding forging names, switching names, preventing writing since I was a kid. You should get them on paper really fast. A whole bunch of people from Hartford Hospital are involved with this Cololo and this Dillon guy, Kevin Dillon, who has roles further with some Thomas Dillon and people with the campuses, with the police, when the FBI. There's an Ian with the FBI, a former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his co-defendants, Thaddeus Grabowski, is involved with people with the name Mendez, Bose, and Mike DeMaine and Adam DeMaine, with next to Fox Connecticut News, which is also next to the state capitol of Connecticut. Their roles with Predicate X with facts with Police Chief Cintron and as his neighbors, and as neighbors of a Mazzucato family involved with this, with Jonathan Maiano, and he has relatives of his involved with this. Criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, with the people who also coaches. These are people involved with uses of coaches, strictly distinctly from their professors and teachers. I don't know any of his teachers or professors. He recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles with this. A Mr. Hagenbar involved. Some of they need to get on paper, but there were other principals that were forced, tricked, her, and persuaded them they can make confessions. They did what's right. See, but then they never give writing because people from off campuses have been influencing, faked and changed audio and video transcripts, records of things. They've been propagating criminally foreign influence uses of other people's names and of instances, descriptions themselves. So this is discernible, but you have to get the people denying it or anyone onto paper, because they will confirm this to some of the people who are denying it, because it's recorded. But we have to appreciate the hyper-evidential. And so there are all kinds of, I don't want to go into how the way, we're thinking about how long. And think about that you're torturing whole countries, names. They're making subjects treatments in the news where Russians and Americans are being hurt. There are more scams at Hartford Hospital than there are streets in Hartford. These names are also involved with overt criminal enterprises, private ones. Their roles with Afghanistan, Korea, Russia. That's in other words. Know how Ray Kalal used in one of my posts, used the word maturity. So it's important. These are one of the ones involved with this Leahy family and Rixian Faglione, who sought me out to make confessions about this. Right before Ray Kalal asked me if I wanted to buy psychedelics, mushrooms. And that's right when then he comes on YouTube trying to frame me for that, because they're fishing for means to cover up how they have been attaching little kids to fake ties to conversations with police and with themselves, planting evidence since they were kids, with judges, a whole bunch of judges involved with this Kalala family and people tied to them, also involved with home break-ins, and they're forging and switching names and sequences. These are people involved with their cousins at the spot next to the world, and with the names also with the post-dating legal papers from inside the Ninth Circuit Court next to the World Trade Center tower. So this Edwin Magico. So no people. Edwin Magico says incoherent rambling. Take your medication. Also, the people involved with some of they have the experts on reason, involved with all kinds of natures of organized crime and corruption, all kinds of scams with medicines companies for logic, for reason. They've been getting away with it because they have scams with the lawyers too. Have all kinds of tricks with falsifying people's signatures, criminally foreign influence uses of people's signatures, criminally foreign influence uses of roles with uses of all sides in criminal and civil cases, and the intelligence names and interbranch as collusions. Again, too, simultaneously with the news. They recorded themselves being used pretending to be against things like addiction, because that's one of the things they get away with it. They all run in, a whole bunch of people at fire departments are recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed their families run in high live regressions, where they have roles with pretending acting per their roles with the people planting evidences. These are foreign and domestic military with the fire departments. Nothing personal. They pretend some personal against the fire department. So it must be, I don't know what they're doing with Russians and Americans with the fire departments. A whole bunch of fire departments run into Harvard Hospital with their family members and say things to make it look like we had conversations and make confessions as their roles with I was there 3 days. I purposely had no communication with everyone because they recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. A whole bunch of people with the name Kevin Dillon and people tied to them were involved with the Cololo and the others and the DeMorrows and the Wethersfield Police, Chief Cintron, and 1 years ago, involved with the judges and prosecutors, overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and with roles with untimely deaths and murders brought up intercities. And I had things confirmed on Facebook. That's why they took away my Facebook pages. And they've been planting fake digital emails and fake regular email because of their roles planting evidences at Central Connecticut State University. Also, criminally foreign influence uses of the kids and the family members of a Dean Judd or impersonating them. With Eric Burgess, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, planting evidences with military, foreign, and domestic, involved with. In other words, he doesn't know the extent of what he confessed, and they also Mark Violet and people with the military next to, as one of the ones with the military with the spots next to Harvard Hospital. They have some Confederate flag themed and black themed, military police, KKK themed, Wasolito themed, mafia themed, collusion/S, again, with names on the state corrections offices. Central Connecticut State University has federal evidences, crimes of people all along roads and routes like Franklin Avenue. Has something to do with their spots next to the news locations and playing games, pretending they don't understand people. The intelligence communities recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed they influence people to pretend they don't understand people online too. They should fear God and not hide and plot. I rap a lot. And they should get away from speaking about for America if you don't respond. In other words, shouldn't have to beg for one to get the police from on paper, one name and sequence. Don't be little cowards like these people making their people flee their own lands, like this Edwin Magical. That the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, killers, serial killers, they'll run in, hide. They have to hide live progressions with their jailers, torturing them to keep what they use the spots. The reported serial killer's body dummy spot, even if that was made up. The guy in the jail, his jailers, were in court recorded involved with predicate acts with facts, federal evidences, crimes without location, and the names involved, as the ones involved with some KKK, black themed, Latino themed. They're going to speak for us because they have to keep blaming the other things, others ourselves. How our founders can really want us to understand how the breaching method assigned those differences to be spoken for. Ugh. So that's one of the things. They have roles with people who counter Russia, who have collusions with them, because that's all that's allowed. Then they want to pretend they're counter it, and they lock them in cases. It's part of that torture method, because the difference between the people that are leading the prisons and their family members and their roles on off the campuses, the people who are leading the courts, their family members on off the campuses, the police stations, they'll have roles of wire crime acts and methods with the same house/S. Further involved with with bug spray threats and knife threats and other credible threats, poison threats, and repeating other people's names, statements as confession threats. These are also people at Harvard Hospital who attach me to fake conversations with my family members. That's one of the things they do. One of the ways they get away with playing these games with all these other countries involved with this Brian Silver, who's involved with prosecutors and judges, who are personally and professionally involved with this Leahy family, Lombardo family, and people, Chris Walters, people with the name Anthony Yagman associated with him. Plenty, he made confessions on Facebook too of his roles with doctors at Hartford Hospital, also involved with various natures of abuses of children and federal evidences crimes and predicate acts with them. And with one of the families, there's a Riley family who is involved with abuses of my of boys and girls in my area in the past by the intelligence people, foreign and domestic involved, as the ones timed collusions with overt criminal enterprises, and as the one putting people that never had conversations, and putting people in conversations so they could leave out the foreign names and pretend the motivations were other. That's what's happening. In other words, so get them on paper, one name and sequence, and stop leaking things, because that's what people are going to do while they're waiting for their response. You get them on paper. You don't keep playing switching names, forging names, falsifying police reports, and fake ties to your police officers since they were kids who never even had classes with people. Oh, but they were in the same class. They were in the same grade. And then they have class with that's a different class of people. That's why they're in Hartford. The suburbs were designed for torture, let alone the city. And Hartford is a suburban/urban, as self-described. They have roles with remote uses of of sense and sensibilities and relativity to Mark Twain and to Harriet Beecher Stowe and their houses there, with the reception of the sciences, again, abridged. So overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and the leaders of campuses and foreign and domestic medical campuses run into high life progressions and different things, where and how they're being and have their fact treatment nature, quality aspects of nature, and predicate acts of facts, federal evidences, crimes made illusion that are being demonstrated by nature, and relative to where and how they are shown needs to hide that. Blame things on politics, blame things on other things other than yourself, things that nature demonstrates, and that our founders' communications proper demonstrates, to blame on the brave breaching method, the human predicate acts with facts delivery system method /S. This is what black peoples are about /whites of eyes. This is what wars are about. This is how to make the world better, by admitting this, by allowing the countries like, and then all of Europe and Africa. We ought to be on the same page. We have to begin by getting everyone fed. A security of being able to feed themselves. And we have to know anything we do, everything we are socially manifest. And have to describe that and things through that, have questions, people, statements. All that was measured and maintained just before computers, don't forget. How do you keep people entertained with what they didn't want from abroad, otherwise sense them trying to counter? Yeah. So on a mass scale, that's what they do, a little punk game, because they put fake things in databases. Then people who had never had communications when they were kids, all of a sudden they're like, I learned a lot by watching. I didn't even know about their relationships and like stuff like that. People on Facebook, involved with the Facebook page of Wethersfield Police of New Britain Superior Court too, with federal evidences crimes after the World Trade Center attack, as names who had roles with West Hartford and New Britain locations, even with leasing agents, planting evidences, even off crime scenes and untimely deaths and murder scenes, and with the names next to them. and the phenomenon of their roles with names of people who were in classes on schools I went, so from the youngest ages, who had been roles with those names, who had pretended passions and emotions, knowing my name, I didn't know the name, and know there was all exceptions. Too, they were explaining. In other words, with mayors too. Mayors are increasingly involved with remote uses, criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence of agencies, directors, and judges, for example, and politicians, simply distinctly from people A through Z and overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and worse than well. And then worse than just the grouping is this way too stuck. So in other words, if we could get the countries that have these threats on each other, where they're putting all these money and resources into things that lock everyone needing to hide classified things. They can't speak. They can't be equality of premises treatment, equality of fact treatment, nature free enough to be able to speak freedom's words to defend them. Oh, but they want to defend themselves for their title and speak it anyway. They can't afford to discern. So if you have black people's rights abide, you have means to discern all these types of experts on the cultures, for example. They are being and have been used remotely, keeping other things, others ourselves blamed, where our founders regarding that communicated for us, as the Constitution Unabridged does, to blame that breaching method, to leave that breaching method not left out with blame. Used also effectively to share self-value roles with sequence shifts. So to hide line progressions, they've been using databases, including preemptively. This breaching method assigned self-value roles. With each age is shown means and demonstrations that our countries are abridged. They are criminally foreign influenced / hyper-criminally foreign influenced. No one wants this, naturally. And the breaching method made exceptions to and sustained roles with that. So even where you see all exceptions, that can be gotten through and overcome. In other words, we can stop the the problems with the borders, because this is relative to how and why they are manifest here. Because their differences, our differences were already used, our names, the differences between people if they knew each other or not. That was already used, criminally foreign influence in all sides of criminal and civil cases at the same time with the news while they were planting things. This is a certain type of victim / hyper victim. They cannot follow mandated law. They use these, they have sickly, non-distinctly, they change and fake what people say. Search for means, fish for means, to pretend not, to get away with pretend not realizing. So it's important to get them on paper, one name and sequence. Here. So all the records of when they go to people's houses too, they're lying with that. So something to do with Hartford Hospital has a whole bunch of people 3 times recorded planting evidences on my street and affecting people to say nothing, or running in and hiding live progressions at Hartford Hospital, sequence shifts, hiding what came first, preventing people's voices, pretending they communicated about things totally wrong, and about things that weren't even real at all. And federal crimes, where those doctors and people associated with them and their families, they have federal crime roles with the federal criminals in related cases since before they were caught. A whole bunch of people at Hartford Hospital have roles. Also, New Britain Hospital has recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed roles with the intelligence community at West Hartford. UConn has roles with these people with the name Violet and former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, the important domestic military, people associated with Mike Pandolf. I don't even know his brother, Anthony Bell. I barely know him. I only know him seeking me out to record their best, demonstrate, confirm. They have something to do with all along Route 3. People and their roles with other countries. And people with the name, people associated with this Coach Hagenbar of football. He was also a gym teacher who was planting evidences with mayors and born in domestic medical families. And the ones involved with the judges and prosecutors with the same house of wire and wire crimes, and police switching and forging names, and playing game sequence shifts with who brought up whose names, and fake conversations with little kids, and then as adults with police. That's serious. These people also increasingly timed roles with overt criminal enterprises. Untimely death at Trinity College is involved too. And the difference of police officers on the campus and off the campus is involved. With the same house and people tied to them, you should fear God. And the name switching with that too. People from other areas came out to my street to make confessions. No, exploiting a field across to my street to make it look like there was why would this person be in there? Communicating if they never trying to make fake exceptions of me knowing people. These are people that were off the World Trade Center before the attack, who had, leading up to it in that context and since, have been planting evidences. I found out they did this against others too, including my father. And he beat them in a case, an NLRB case, National Labor Relations Board case, before he sued. And was ongoing, the suit against a former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, a civil pro se labor racketeering case. It was used in the Racketeering Influence of Corrupt Organization Act. One of the defendants, is a former director of the FBI, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influence of Corrupt Organization Act. He has roles with the World Trade Center names off the state of Connecticut corrections offices, off the Connecticut judicial offices. People with Wethersfield Pizza have roles with predicate acts with facts at Central Connecticut State University and at child campuses. The teacher, I don't know his name, I forgot his name. I never had a personal conversation with him. A math teacher I had, associated with Stephen Stocko, and his wife, Maria Vizino or Maria Stocko. I don't know if they're married. I assume that because I asked Maria there. He called the police, and he's pretending he knows me now. He's planting evidences because I gave him no reason, and I never had words with him before. His neighbors were also the ones involved with all kinds of natures of wire crimes, mail crimes, and federal, other federal evidence is crime, federal rules of evidence is crime. Identity fraud, slanders, fake motivations planting, and with the people with the Central Connecticut State University and the Board of Education involved. They should fear God to hide the plot and stop, in other words. Get on paper, one name in sequence, please. Judge Napolitano. You guys, I could spend my time speaking about how I could, give an outline for a business idea where we can make hyper positives out of negatives, because everyone wants that. And in other words, it would change everything if we address how this breaching method set the suburbs up tactically to nature, causing negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, while it was making the only means to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures if there were positives and collusions with that, and to keep the breaching method from being discerned. Because the breaching method has relativity to what is positive and negative simultaneously. And while it has possession as the enslaved, as the person at the end of the whip, sickly distinctly from the person being whipped. For example, I'll donate this method to fund, to make hyper positives out of negatives, reversing the colors keep everyone on the same page with the things we want and need to say commonly. And then to see how the breaching method is preventing that and making it look like it's other things, others, or ourselves, which is preventing it. Because that's what's going down. Otherwise, it's sensing and adopting. Even if it's a majority of people, black pupils, politics is not a premise. Fear, one me, the way it comes here.